Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Let's see who we got here. Welcome, welcome all. We're going to give a minute or two to let more folks come in, but we appreciate you guys joining us today. We have a great panelist. We're a panel set up with some local entrepreneurs, so we really appreciate you guys hopping on. So let's see who we got here. See if any familiar faces. I got Rich. Hey, how's it going, Rich? How's it going, Rebecca? Got Rob, Tempest. It's good to see some familiar names in here. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. All right. Let's see. I think we're good to go. Let's get started here. Well, definitely good afternoon. We want to welcome everyone to the Leap of Faith Navigating Entrepreneurship, brought to you by One Philadelphia. If you guys do not know, One Philadelphia is a coalition of stakeholders working together to make Philadelphia the capital of equitable tech and innovation. This includes preparing underrepresented communities to create and sustain venture-backable tech startups. If you don't know, my name is Rudy Ellis. I'm the CEO of a local startup here in Philadelphia called Switchboard Live, and we have a live stream management platform that makes it easy for your live content to go across all your platforms simultaneously. And today I'm joined by a panel of experts in the tech entrepreneurship to help provide insight on how to navigate the entrepreneurial ecosystem and founder's journey. We want to thank our panelists and audience for your participation and engagement today with today's virtual panel. And One Philadelphia will provide more virtual opportunities to interact with industry experts over the next few months. So with that, I wanted to definitely give an opportunity for our panelists to introduce themselves. We will start with Blessy, if you wouldn't mind, definitely introduce yourself and then pass the baton to Amanda or Zaza after that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rudy. Hey, everyone. My name is Blessy Thomas. I am with Innovate Capital Growth Fund. We are an equity fund focused on investing in minority or women-owned businesses, primarily in the Mid-Atlantic region, that are at growth stage. And we really define that as the starting point is at least $2 million in revenue, preferably positive EBITDA, so positive numbers on that bottom line. And we will write $2 to $3 million check sizes on average. And these are non-control equity investments. Pretty industry agnostic. So I'll leave it at that and pass it on to Amanda.
Hi guys, I am Amanda Sabreah. I'm a 3-time founder. I've started a consumer company, a B2B company, and now I'm a consulting firm, a strategy and design consulting firm. We help scale stage companies convert traffic into customers. And that can be through redesigning their entire product experience, to messaging, to brand. We are in the business of taking people who say, I'm just shopping around, into actual customers. I love it. I've worked with over 75 brands, Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to Series A, Series B startups. So I've seen a lot of problems in a lot of different arenas. I've had my own problems, and I've overcome a lot of challenges. So yes, I'm here. Zaza, it's your turn.
Hey everyone, I'm Zaza and I do have a flip phone. It's true, the rumors are true. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nicklpass. What we do is very simple. We get people through paywalls. Through being the key word, we actually partner with hundreds of media companies, not just in the US, but around the world. We sell the company primarily to businesses. So specifically executives at Fortune 500 companies use our products to get access to the news they need to be successful. We've raised over $5 million in venture funding. We initially started in Brooklyn and moved to Philadelphia now 3 years ago, and very excited to be on this panel.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Since you went last, we're going to actually kick it off with you, Zaza, as the entrepreneur. We love to, if for people who don't know, what's the origin story? What prompted you to take that leap to start Nicklpass?
Yeah, so I think a couple things led to the leap. So my background is I was the head of international at Huffington Post. So I was in charge of expanding the brand abroad. And a couple things. One, I got to work on really amazing deals. I got to get promoted really quickly. Ariana Huffington is very big into the like Peter principle. Like if you can handle more work, she'll just give you more work. And I thought it was awesome. But at the same time, I saw the challenges that media was facing. This was 2016, and so clickbait was basically becoming the thing and started impacting the presidential election, as we all know. But my background is I started my career in community organizing. My dad's a freelance journalist covering corruption. And what I knew then is that media was suffering from a business model challenge. So I actually set out to start a micropayments company. And at the time, Bitcoin was going on. Now it's going up now, but like it's gone through its waves. This was one of its first waves. We thought we were going to pay publishers in crypto. Investors loved the idea, publishers loved the idea, customers hated it. So hard reset, we had to pivot, and we had to eventually find the product that we have today. And it actually required a lot. We recapped the company. We actually went through Techstars and Lyft Labs. It's actually how I moved to Philadelphia. But yeah, I'm pretty passionate about politics and society. And I think that's one of the reasons why I've stuck to solve this problem for so long. And obviously it's tied to my personal story, given what my dad does.
Appreciate that. Just one quick follow-up, because I think it's going to help really set the stage for this conversation. When you had the idea, what was what were like the top 1 to 3 things you did, to kind of take that again back to the leap? Like, what were the top 3 things that you said, hey, I need to do A, B, and C before I can, go, as they say, 10 toes down?
Yeah.
All in.
It took a lot to go 10 toes down. So I had just gotten a bonus from my company, so I was able to take the leap, and I knew I had some runway for the year. And I do think that's something to bring up, that like that first leap does cost something, and how people get those resources together, it can be pretty creative. I know some people, will work while they're working on their thing on the side. But for me, that bonus really helped. I think the second thing that was really important is I started talking to other founders for the first time. And so I think one of the things that when you have an idea, a lot of folks at the beginning stages are very protective of the idea. They don't want anyone to steal it, And I think one of the values that I live by is that dreams are best built together with other people and out in the open. And so when you start talking to other founders, what you find are different resources. And specifically for me, there was a founder who had gotten into Grand Central Tech, which is a tech program in New York. And I got to work in his office for free for almost a year. And so I was able to make connections. I was able to see the pace of people working. And so going back to that, talking to other founders, if I hadn't told him what I wanted to do, I don't know if I would have gotten that free office space and that exposure.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Great segue. So, we're going to make an assumption here. So you took that leap. What are some of the things, and this is directed to you, Amanda, what are some of the things that as a founder, and you have an idea, I'd love to kind of go to those early stages. Like, are there some tips and tricks based off of you seeing the full gambit of companies and learning and doing campaigns? What are some of the things that can be done at the very early stages to help you, I like to use the word, validate if what you have really makes sense?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing is to really learn and crystallize the problem that the person who's going to be buying is having. I think, and I see this at a lot of different stages, but when you're just starting out, I think a lot of people get really excited about their idea or their innovation. Their investors get excited, as Zaza said, but that doesn't mean your customers are going to be excited. And so I like to tell founders now, like, let's obsess over the who for just like a minute. Let's just obsess over the who and see if we can form fit your innovation and your vision and your passion to what they really want. And if it can't be form fitted, then we need to like innovate here. So I would say obsess over the who, really get to know, and there are a lot of different frameworks to do this, but really get to know what problem they are trying to solve that is so icky that they're willing to pay money for it, and not do it themselves. And so that's what I would say is a lot of people get really excited about their innovation, and it doesn't mean your innovation is any less, right? But sometimes you do have to dumb it down, or you have to like, you kind of have to like rotate it just a little bit so a customer can actually absorb it and use it and adopt it.
Two quick follow-ups. So one, is icky? Is that a technical term? Is that the official? Is
I like it.
Is that?
Yeah, I would say like, I think when, you know, a lot of times we do customer interviews and analysis for companies, and I like to call it the icky moment, where you get to a moment in the interview where a customer has some sort of visceral emotional reaction that's negative. I think a lot of people look for positive emotion, but I teach my team, like, we're looking for the negative emotion because that's really what they're going to pay for. It's like when you can afford a cleaning lady, right? And you're like, or, you know, a cleaning company, and then your house is so a mess that you're just willing to pay for somebody else to come in and do it. You want to get to that point in your innovation. And that can be very small. You just need to get to that. You need to find that icky moment.
Yeah.
Zaza, I know you raised your hand. Did you want to chime in, or?
I was trying to co-sign. I wanted one of the buttons to co-sign. Just co-sign.
Full of emotions today. I appreciate that. I like it. Okay, so let's jump here real quick. So we're past that. We got the icky moment, right? We have some data. What would be the I guess the next thing, you know, from a validation perspective that you think would be attainable at that early stage?
So I like to tell people sometimes the smallest form of a product can solve the biggest problem. So take Zaza's Nicklpass, for instance. There are plenty of articles where I get to it and I'm like, golly, another gate. I really want to read this article. And I'm sure if I just go sign up for Nicklpass, I won't have that anymore. And it would solve like so much of my headache, and it's probably a very simple product. So I would say, I see a lot of companies that have a lot of bloated products, and they've lost touch because as soon as they get to an icky moment, they're like, oh my God, now let's build all of these things to solve the icky moment. But a lot of time that's like one or two really good features, with a really, really good messaging throughout the product, and it'll like work just like that.
Now, I love that. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Blessy. So we're gonna continue now this linear path, right? So let's assume that we have the information we need. We you know, we got the validation. We have an MVP, and you know, in order to go to market, you know, the right way, one of the ways to go to market is obviously you need capital, right? I'd love to just hear from your perspective some of the key things that you're looking at when people are coming to someone like yourself or another type of resource in the community because they think they need capital to go and do these things, right? Any insight? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that at that very early stage as well.
Yeah. A couple things, you know, around that. I think, so two houses, I mean, you guys probably heard me say we focus on growth stage. The other side of the house is that we come from a nonprofit who's a sponsor of the fund that has a lot of services that touches across the trajectory, especially focused on minority businesses across the US with the goal of connecting them to capital, specifically equity investments. And there's a small, you know, portion of investment out of that nonprofit. There's also that they're kind of starting to venture into. There was a visionary competition, unfortunately. I think applications are closed, so I'm going to caveat that. But you know, they're trying to kind of put larger check sizes so that it's meaningful. So I think that one's a $250K check size. But just so that you understand kind of the spectrum of where we're coming from and what we're shifting towards. But the question on, you know, what do we look for around capital, you know, capital investment decisions? I think Amanda hit on it. I think there's kind of two prongs. One is, you know, we anticipate at the stage that you're at, your product, your trajectory, your plan, everything's going to have some iteration, right? It's too early to tell. So a lot of it is kind of thinking through, how's the business leader thinking about this business? How are they processing through what they're thinking about? So I got a question today that asked, does an investor look at a scenario badly if we got grant dollars in our financials? I said it really depends on how you're thinking about it, right? So if you're going to tell me, because it's covering their salaries, you got to get creative when you don't have family or friends, or it's limited and so on. That's a great thing to see, that you're trying to maximize the potential out there. However, if you're telling me your projection suddenly doesn't account for the fact that you had a capital infusion that's not repeatable, it's the rationale that I'm kind of looking for, that we're looking for in the business leader, because the expectation is a lot of things are going to change, and can you pivot with that change? So you're betting on that leader to be able to move and pivot, and to kind of assess feedback well and critically, and receive some of it well. Again, we recognize this is your baby, this is your passion, but if that's the other piece, if there's no room for coachability in the process, it's going to be harder for me to bet $1 with you and your business, because it's a different level of risk of you not being able to receive any type of coaching. So those are kind of the qualitative piece, and then kind of the quantitative is what Amanda talked to. Like, if there is no market and if there is no differentiation, it's going to be really hard to figure out, like, who's going to buy this and why. And if you can't answer that question strongly, and if your investor can't quickly get it, of like, okay, I see what it is, there's something missing. And it doesn't mean you have to give up. It just means you got some work to do still.
Are there any like suggestive type of approaches or guidance that you can, bestow upon, the folks that are here, thinking about, going out to look for capital? I know that, like you said, there's two different houses, but, again, I'm sure there are folks that are coming to you just said, hey, I have this cool idea and I need to do this. Like, what would be what would you say if you were in a conversation like that? Do this or do that, at least from a kind of a direct resource perspective. Yeah.
I mean, I can recommend the closest in proximity service that we have is called the MBE Equity Multiplier Program that
Perfect.
I referenced.
Right? What is that?
So just tangibly, the goal of that is to help entrepreneurs understand the capital raising path. So there's tools in that sense ready for you. It's to help you package what you need to present before an equity investor. So that could be your deck, your value. Some things are early, but if you're a little further down the line, there could be some support around valuation package. It's also then, once you're ready, and also some level of data room kind of advice. And then once you're ready, looking for connections, that program will look to connect you to relevant investors. But obviously that readying piece will kind of, we'll go through the experience that Amanda referenced, that Zaza referenced. There's going to be some element of that. Because the program wants to set you up best for accessing capital. You kind of get not many shots in front of investors, so you want to be best positioned when you're in front of them. So that's one practical application. If you guys want to go to the Enterprise Center MB Equity Multiplier Program, everything's on there. There's an intake form. So just practically how you can get connected. That's one option. There are several others, and then maybe the best way to do that is follow up with us, and we can try to follow you where you need to go.
Great. Zaza, I'd love to hear when you were at that stage, right, yourself, where you were thinking about, hey, I'm past the icky moment, like now I want to go and pitch investors. Any examples or guidance now looking back that you may have done differently, that you've learned through that process?
Yeah. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about when we landed on Nicklpass, and not so much about the blockchain piece of it, because the blockchain piece of it is literally everything that you shouldn't do, we did. Like everything that man was like, don't do this, don't get obsessed with it. We got obsessed with the technology. We like all of the things you said not to
No,
do.
but if you wouldn't mind, like
Yeah.
this is the opportunity. Like this is, being able to have, 45 minutes with folks that have those battle scars. That's the type of information, that, I want to learn from, because all you have is time and money, in these early stages. So if you can tell me something that can avoid 2-3 weeks, a month, I want to hear those. So yeah, if there are some things, whether it's like your hit list, please,
Yep.
please go ahead.
You know what? Okay, thank you, Rudy. Thank you for that encouragement. So I will share the scars.
Hey, we got an extra day this year. Like let's get it going, right?
I love this. By the way, number one on my list of resources is talking to other people, other founders, like all the folks in this room, other executives is amazing. When we went out to start a micropayments plugin, it was based on a very simple thesis that with Bitcoin and Ethereum, the processing fee of a transaction would be small, infinitesimally small. And because of that, micropayments online would be possible. So very, very simply. So, I think Stripe right now is like, was it like 3% plus 3, so something like that, or 0.3. So
2.9.
Exactly, 2.9. It adds up on, I love that you knew that. It just adds up as you do stuff. And people are like, okay, this problem hasn't been solved because of a technology problem. And if we can solve the technology, we will have micropayments online. What I didn't understand fully is that it wasn't a technology problem. It was a supplier problem. Publishers did not think about their products atomized in articles. They thought about journalists. They thought about sections. They thought about time. They thought about you can subscribe for a year or for 6 months. They did not think about articles. So we got a whole bunch of pushback. The other thing that we didn't really think about is, what would a micropayment business look like? So just looking at a P&L, like what would be the top line? Is it going to be gross GMV? Is it going to be a recurring revenue model? What would our gross margin look like? And I think because of that piece of it, we couldn't really effectively communicate to a wide swath of investors. So we got a lot of no's. So people who wound up saying yes were people who, honestly, I connected with and really wanted to see blockchain adoption. And I think, to Blessy's point, really trusted that I was going to be able to sort of figure something out along the way. I think in retrospect, the advice I would give is, it isn't enough to understand the technology. You also have to understand the business dynamics in your industry. And you also need to kind of have a sense of when your business gets to whatever inflection point. So when it's mature, when it IPOs, what is it going to look like? What would the gross margins look like? What would your investment in sales and marketing look like? Is this going to be PLG focused, in which case your marketing expense has to be high? Or is this going to be enterprise focused, in which case you got to be hiring a whole bunch of sellers? And I think early on, those aren't the things that you're thinking about. And I think you have to put yourself to do that.
Appreciate that. That's definitely dropped some gems and knowledge there. So hopefully folks were taking some notes there. Amanda, I'd love for you to, kind of circle in. I see you shaking your head a ton, right? Especially if yeah, please, the floor is yours if you wanted to kind of chime in on maybe some of the points as I mentioned.
Yeah, I think that understanding the business you're in, like really studying it, like the who is just part of it. There are a lot of different, business is just a series of problem solving. So like once you solve the who, you solve the what, then you solve the capital, and then you solve whatever. I think two things someone told me that like really resonated with me and helped me reach this like new level of entrepreneurship, which was, the riches are in the niches. So like, if you can cut your market one more degree to just get started, do it, right? Which leads me to my second point of, it took me a long time. And I think that as a Black people, we love entertainment. We love cool. We love sexy. Like that's just innate in us. And that's what other cultures love about us. And I think that in business, like if I could write a book, I would say that business is not really a creative act, right? It is, there's a level of unsexiness and boring that you just need to like bite and like hold, and it's painful because you want to have like the cool, sexy Nike business. But 80% of Nike is not cool. That's just the marketing team, right? And so I think that when you can kind of get over that feeling of like, oh man, this is like boring. It's only for this group of people, and the whole world isn't gonna know my name. When you can get over that, then you can like start really soaring. And so I see that a lot is like people will come to me and be like, and this is at every level, you guys. I've had Fortune 500 companies that come and say, we want to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into this, but their customers are saying, no, we want just a better product packaging, right? And we'll buy more of it. And it's like, no, but we want to do this. This is cool. We want to partner with these celebrities. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, just change the packaging, right? And so I think that if you can just bite the bullet of the boring and the unsexy, you'll be a really good entrepreneur.
So good.
It's interesting. One of the things that come to mind when you mention, the wanting to get your name out there and on the marketing side, the fun side is, I think when you have that idea, there is that period of, am I the right, founder to go and potentially solve this problem, right? So, you hear about the term Zaza mentioned as product market fit, but, is the founder market fit? Am I the right founder to go and solve this problem? I mean, that would probably save you time and energy, that you're about to embark on, because you may not be ready for the journey, right? Because it definitely is a marathon. It isn't a sprint. And so I think you brought up a good point of, you have to do some self-reflection to say, hey, this is a good idea, but maybe I am not the right person, but maybe there's an opportunity to work with, a team, or you're building and using your network to be able to take that idea and you're a part of it from a product perspective or have you, but maybe you're not the CEO, right? And so I think that's definitely a challenge, because it could be lonely being a CEO at times, right? There are things that you're dealing with that, you've never experienced. And so, for me personally, I think having a network of, like-minded folks that you can go and talk to and break bread and have conversations, because, that's paramount. And, I'd love to know, Blessy, if there's resources that you may know of that we can share, for the folks, that maybe of interest, at the Enterprise Center or just in Philadelphia in general, that are resources for CEOs or founders or people starting off as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are different groups and associations that you can get in the right room. So one example is Association for Corporate Growth. It's more heavily, PE related kind of entities, but within Association for Corporate Growth, there's a diverse group, there's a growing diverse group that's focused on how to interconnect the ecosystem, right? That's between investors, service providers, expertise, all of that. So being in some of those rooms, maybe like that you traditionally would not want to step into, but it is becoming more diversified. So there's more of an you could probably find a similar soul, somebody who aligns with you in the mix. I think go ahead and put yourself in the uncomfortable room at times. So that's one example of a group. And then you're gonna figure out who's out there. One of the things we say is money goes where it knows. So does relationships. And that's some of the dynamic we're trying to change, right? Is if money goes where it knows, then we need the money to be with people who look similar to us, so that it can drive to where they know. And that's typically the challenge with, even when people say there's no pipeline, blah, blah, blah. That's because they don't know. They're not in relationship. They're not in community with their respective group that they're talking about. So just, start to cross intersections of areas that you're in. look at some of those associations that are very focused on investors and go to one of their events. See what they're talking about. Who do they invest in? It's fine. They don't have to look at, like, they don't have to consider you the first time. Keep going. Because you will, it is still a smaller population eventually, and you'll get somebody's attention. But I think it is important to be seen in those spaces, because you're essentially saying, in that context, like, you're here for the money. You don't want the program. You don't want the training. You want the money, and you're here ready for the money. So that's kind of the, I think those are the spaces you want to be in. I think, Rudy, just to kind of tag along a little bit of what you're saying about, are you the founder that should be working on this product? I think that it's a question to ask across the stages of your business life cycle, right? Because you might be fine as a founder when you're starting, right? Because maybe it is very product focused, but
good point.
Once that business gets to a scale, should you be the CEO of the business? It's a different skill set to be managing a larger scale business versus, scaling up a product to that point, right? So you might be fine. So I think it's a question you have to keep asking yourself. And it does not mean you have to lose interest in the company. You probably are going to be growing a more higher value company, which means you're going to generate more value out of that company with whatever stake you have in it. So by maybe saying, look, my strength at this scale is not to run this business as a CEO. It's to be the chief, whichever sphere that you're strong at, right? Like,
gotcha. Yeah.
So it's something to really consider every time there's some iteration or stage of your business.
No, that's a great point. That continual aspect of self-reflecting, because you're right. Some folks may be that 0 to 1, but that, hey, I need to get to 5, and there's going to be some gaps, and being able to plug in those gaps as well. Amanda, I know we probably didn't mention this, with regards to where you're located. You are actually in the Atlanta region, correct?
Yes.
And, we would love to just learn, maybe there are examples of the types of community and resources that you guys have there that you've, been a part of or seen, just to help founders, especially, founders of color, of how to get started. Like, are there things that come to mind that, whether it's you personally or folks that you've worked with, that you can even just mention?
Yeah, I think Joey Womack is doing an incredible job out of Goody Nation at getting early stage founders ready and connected with other founders, especially like founders a little bit ahead of you, and then founders at the same level of you as you. So we have like those type of communities that are really good. And I remember when I was like first starting, I would go to all of those events. I did get into a couple like meetups, and it really did help just to get my foot in the door and like get ready for what this journey was going to be about. But Atlanta's scene is growing. We have different like co-working spaces like the Gathering Spot, or my good friends over at Collab, like Barry and Jewel. So we have a lot of resources. I think the one thing that I've learned in like traveling and meeting more is your resources can be anywhere. And as a founder, as Zaza said earlier, the best thing that you can do is when you're facing a problem and you're like, I don't know how to navigate this challenge, the faster you call another founder, the faster you will get through the challenge, because your challenges aren't typically that unique. They might be like unique in some nuance, but they're not super unique. So I see Rich Lassiter on the call. We talked a couple weeks ago. I had a really big deal on the table, and it got delayed to Q2. And he called me just to check in on me. And I said, I'm going to have to call you back. If I don't call you back, that means I'm spiraling. So call me, right? And he called me.
That's
and
awesome.
then he talked me through like, okay, this is how you go back to them. This is what you do next. And I think, Rich is in Philly. So it's like, just connecting, reaching out on LinkedIn, finding other founders or even other specialists in different areas Rich is like a sales genius, right? And so I'm not a great closer. I can admit that. So having people that you can call and say, you know, can you help me through how to have this conversation is key.
It's huge. Zaza, do you have a black book? Do you have a you know, folks that you call on to help you?
I got a few folks that I call on, and something I've realized is, to Blessy's point, if you actually just keep going to stuff, what you'll find is you won't even know that you needed to talk to someone about a problem. Like you're just there, you're like, wait a minute, I'm having the same problem too. And I do think there is something about I heard someone call it Solomon's paradox, where it's like other people's problems are quite light, but your own problems seem very heavy to you.
Heavy,
And
yep.
so when you're able to give people advice, there's something that it triggers in them and vice versa. And I find that to be super helpful. So yes, there are people that I call, and staying in spaces where other founders are, you will just naturally start to share your problems.
And you can make those calls on your flip phone, right? I had to go back to that.
I gotta preload the card before I can make those
Well,
calls.
so I mean, that's actually a great segue. So like, you know, the whole point of this event and, you know, One Philadelphia, it's a convenient, right? It's being able to put us in, you know, these types of conversations and events. I think there's definitely an event next week, I believe March 8th, Latinas and Tech in Philly to host the One Philadelphia meetup. So it's these types of events that are happening that you're absolutely right. So we definitely encourage, you know, as a founder, as well as someone that's in the Philadelphia ecosystem, to go to these events, because those spontaneous serendipitous collisions will happen. And you're absolutely correct, right? You know, being able to talk it through with someone that may be experiencing the same thing you went through last week, or something you overcame that you're able to share. So if you haven't walked away with anything from this, definitely, you know, get out from behind the chair. Pandemic's over, right? It's not that bad of a day-to-day, you know, get out the office and go to these events. And there's also great resources in Philly. You have Philly Startup Leaders, you have PACT, you have, you know, Philly Tech Week, which is coming up. So these are things where, you know, we as a community are, you know, continually to provide as a resource, you know, for our Philadelphia ecosystem. So I think Damon put some information for sure. Yeah, here we go. In the chat. I think we could probably, you know, I'm gonna flip this and not be the moderator. Is there a question that maybe Blessy, Amanda, or Zaza have that you'd like to just, you know, tee up before we go into a Q&A with the audience? Is there anything, I don't know, you know, do you guys may want to answer or ask rather of the panel? Okay, quit them off guard. That was a curveball.
Right.
Yeah,
I think the question that at least I've been, I think I know what the answer is, but I think it's worth maybe us talking about it for the group, is given the changes that have happened over the last 18 months, how should founders be thinking about profitability, sustainability, fundraising over the next 12 to 18 months? Because I think the culture is very different now than when it was before.
great questions.
Yeah. I can speak a little bit to that.
Sure.
I will say, and this might be a little further down the path, but I will say new investors considering like a bridge round, the appetite for that might be much lower right now, because there's a lot of questions out there. At least we run into it where you know, your existing base of investors are tapped out.
Yep.
Right. And if you're coming in, you're basically planning on going in with an add-on already in the belt, like that you have to be ready for, right? I think a couple, and there's no answer, like I don't have a final answer to this, but it's something that you have to think about. The reality is we can't control time, we can't control the seasons we're in. So you have to really think through some things if you are, you know, and this is something for you to think about as you think about the future and the macro things that affect your valuation. You know, can you hold on long enough to exit at a better valuation or no? And yes, it could be unfair maybe maybe not like, maybe it's just like a crappy time to exit. Like, let's call it that. Like, maybe that's what it is. But those are some things to be aware of, that there are things outside of our control that does impact some of this stuff, right? But I do think I just hear, kind of talking to different investors, a caution to kind of meet like those bridge rounds where it seems like, you know, businesses have tapped out of what they've raised. They want to buy some time for a better valuation environment, and they're looking for that in between. But that means new investors are taking on quite a hefty risk, and kind of they're in an environment where everybody's questioning valuation, and so it's going to be hard to meet that dynamic sometimes. So maybe more no's, maybe more investors to touch right now. Maybe trying to
Thicker
figure
skin,
out,
huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so
30 seconds would be a lot of the founders that we're working with is, I don't know the stage that everybody's in. I'm hoping that they are at the stage I'm about to talk about, but if you are getting a good amount of traffic or you have a good audience, rotating focus to understanding who that traffic is and how you can better convert that traffic. That's one focus area that we're helping our like scale stage founders focus on, so that they can go back to their investors and say, hey, we've learned a more efficient way to convert customers, or lower CAC, lower customer acquisition costs. Another area is to focus on how to bring back customers that bought from you before. And so increasing lifetime value, increasing customer value, which ultimately increases shareholder value is another area to focus. I think a lot of founders are like, more TikTok ads. And it's like, okay, well, if you have enough traffic, sometimes it's just worth focusing on converting that traffic. Because one, it'll give you more revenue through this period, like Blessy said, because it may be longer for you to get your next yes.
Words of wisdom. Definitely appreciate that. Zaza, you want to answer your own question, or?
I mean, I felt like I was a panelist just now. Like, honestly, that was amazing. Thank you to the both of you, honestly.
Yeah, I will say my caveat would be, especially for the folks that are starting out, right? So now you're kind of coming into this at the very beginning. I would say the expectations of what you're able to achieve with the technology that exists that bar is going to be a lot higher, because there's so many, free backend infrastructure, free, email system, free this. So, being able to talk to customers, validate customers, get that MVP, get people on the waiting list. Like, there's so many tools and resources that you can use that are very, very, free to low cost. That's going to then, it's great as an entrepreneur because you can go and do these things. Whereas 10 years ago, you had to stand up servers and have developers do all this stuff. Like, the barrier to entry is so much lower. But on the flip side, the expectation of you being able to show what you're able to do with these free, Gmail accounts and Wix and, WordPress websites and things of that nature, or Webflow, websites. So the expectation is you're going to be able to do a lot with, a little bit of stuff. So knowing that is you have to be able to showcase that this is a repeatable problem that I'm solving. People are willing to pay, and here is my reason for that. Here is the validation. Here are, people putting down payments on, not down payments, but security deposits on something that's not even built yet. Like, that's conviction enough that someone is willing to come out of their pocket for something because they too have that problem. So to wrap that all up, it's knowing that it will be tougher, because the expectation is you should be able to do more with less. And then, as a Black founder, that's just going to unfortunately add to that. So, make sure you are prepared to go, and you are the right founder to go and take these battle scars, because you'll be a much much better founder on the other side of that as well. So I think we are going to open it up for questions because we want to be very mindful of folks' time here today, especially mine because I have a call at 3 o'clock. I'm just being honest, and I can't be late for. So we have, I guess, one question in here. So Damon, from Rich, what would be your advice to the many Black founders who think VC is the answer? Anyone want to take that? What would be your advice to the many Black founders who think VC is the answer?
I'm gonna go quickly because I would love to get to Tim's question as well with the time we have left, but VC is for a very specific type of company. Like if you're Zaza, doing micropayments and, really trying to disrupt journalism, like digital journalism, then yes, you probably need VC. But I think that I'm a proponent of you can have a really nice life with a nice lifestyle business, and like you just need to determine the two. My second part to that is like I would not build another product company. I mean, I would not if I were to build another product company, I would not even think about VC unless something caught on fire. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be. I got to go get money. And I think that that is the mindset that most people should have.
Zaza, Blessy, anyone want to chime in or no?
I mean, I think I'm in alignment with Amanda. I mean, there's a very specific, you have to know what VCs expect of you. And is that what's the exit of what you're thinking? If those two things don't match up, and you have to be realistic about that, right?
Right.
Be realistic about what they are expecting out of you. It may sound like it's doable to do the kind of exit they're talking about, but you really have to do some assessment around that. However, there's lifestyle businesses and there's a different type of pathway, which is it could be PE. And that doesn't mean you're not a growing business. There is substantially growing businesses in that pathway. The path looks different. It's just different. And their expectations on the return, yes, they're going to have an expectation on return, but it doesn't look the way VC does because they have different objectives. So get to know the other options of those kinds of funding. Because I think typically I hear VC and I'm thinking, that's a lot of businesses that don't fit that dynamic that are thinking VC. But then you're missing out on all the other options of capital that you should be preparing for, and how do you get in that lane rather than the VC lane? So.
Yep. I 100% agree. I mean, these are experts to the folks in the audience. The only thing I would add is I think looking at a lot of products and a lot of things that founders are working on, there are a lot of big companies that have R&D budgets that feel like it matches a strategic initiative. And so I think to the point of like thinking broadly about what capital is and its expectations, what you're looking for might match more in line with a program like that. And we've seen that a lot with some of the programs that some of the companies that came out of the Comcast Accelerator.
Got it. Yeah, I'll chime in real quick. From my perspective, as a founder who has raised capital and, thinking about what that next transition is going to be, then you start looking back and realizing like, man, you gave up X amount of your company, and what is it going to take to really walk away with something meaningful? Because VCs will get their money first, right? And so, knowing that at the beginning of there's implications, right? So you have to really have a much larger exit to be able for you to get your money, which is down here. So VC's here, everyone in between, common stock is at the very end. And so, not knowing and understanding how venture capital work is definitely is something you need to make sure you understand, to Blessy's point, like that you are walking in and marrying or matching up with an entity that's going to be with you through this duration. And when you have that, ringing the bell or, acquisition or what have you, that yes, they're going to take a large percentage of that early on, or, at that liquidating event. And it has to be a very large event enough for you to be able to say it was worth the last 7 or 10 years of my life to do this, as well. So just kind of throw another kind of thought process in there to really understand VC can work, but what the outcome has to happen in order for it to be beneficial for everyone, not just the venture capitalists as well. Last question from Tempest. Hey all, in your early stages, did you engage in any bartering to get the resources you need or generally get to that next checkpoint in your journey? If not bartering, what were some tactics you used to get to that next step? So at the very, very early stages, like how were you making lemonade with no lemons, basically, right? Like how are you getting to those next stages with limited resources, if I'm reading that correct, right, Tempest? What do you think? Amanda or Zaza, anyone want to take that?
Zaza, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, there's a West African parable about stone soup. The chief person that starts with nothing in a clay pot, and they're just like, oh, why don't you bring some water? Okay, I'll watch your kids. Why don't you bring some onions? And then like at the end of the day, he's got soup enough for everybody. I definitely think it's a big part of the job at the early stages, because I mean, honestly, as an entrepreneur, that craft is really trying to build something with resources that aren't really your own. And that is a key part of it. So at the beginning, I mentioned that founder that let me work out of his office. Because I had started my career in consulting, I was able to help him with financial models. That wasn't really came from LA. He knew people in that space, but he couldn't really put models together. Early on, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to give people little bits of equity. I think too much can be a problem, but getting them incentivized to get people around the vision, it's the same thing as hiring, honestly. So I think it's a very similar approach. And yeah, I think bartering, trading, finding people to do stuff for free, it's going to take you to a certain point, right? Like it'll take you to that prototype, getting maybe the first customer, but once you need to get into that, I'm supporting people, I'm trying to deliver on stuff, that's where it starts to fall apart. So just be mindful of that. But yes, definitely a fan.
Appreciate that answer. All right. Well, we are almost at time. First off, I want to say thank you guys for participating. Is there anything you'd love to talk about, plug? How can people learn more about Nicklpass, Thought Factory? Please, each one, take 30 seconds to do your plug, if you would.
My plug is just read Obviously Awesome. That's one of my favorite books to recommend to founders of every stage or marketing leaders or sales leaders. Obviously Awesome. By April Dunford, I think.
Zaza?
So yeah, obviously if you need access to news, let us know. Zaza at nicklpass.com, no E. Here for all of your news challenges. I'd like to plug The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
Ben Horowitz, right?
Yeah, Ben Horowitz, very impactful book. It's so good. I've read it before. I'm probably going to read pieces of it again, and just talks a little bit about just that, the hard thing about hard things.
Blessy?
And I think I gave my LinkedIn to Damon, so you guys should have it. So feel free to connect. And happy to help you navigate the ecosystem as best as I can. So please do reach out.
Appreciate
No
it.
book to plug. I won't give you a reading.
I'm actually reading a book. It's listening. I guess you got to really be specific. It's called Profits First. So it's an interesting book. Especially to Zaza's point in this time, right? What's better ways to value your company is to basically take your profits before expenses. So it's an interesting look at that. Well, cool. I definitely want to again say thank you guys for participating and joining us. Damon's going to drop in a link for the next meetup that's happening as well. So for folks that are local, please sign up to join us there. Last kind of just housekeeping things. Wanted to make sure people are aware of that One Philadelphia is hosting or partnering rather with Technically to host Philadelphia Tech Week from May 3rd to the 11th. So please follow One Philadelphia on all its social channels at One PHL Tech and all of its social channels on Instagram, X, LinkedIn, etc. And I think we're going to put a community calendar link in the chat as well. So there you go. Boom. Well, cool. We are at time. We want to thank everyone for joining us again today. And for the folks that are coming out next week on March 8th, we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Have a good rest
Thank
of your
you.
day.
Putting this together. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Talk to you guys. Peace.
Peace.